The apron doesn't fit. This is the first thing he notices. The apron is a size medium, standard issue, white cotton with the logo on the chest, and it wraps around his waist with about 3 inches of overlap on a man who is used to wearing suits that are cut to his exact measurements by a tailor on Madison Avenue who has been dressing him for 11 years and who would be horrified to see what his client is wearing right now. The apron has stains on it. Not old stains, fresh ones from the shift before, tomato and oil, and something green that might be pesto or might be cilantro or might be the residue of whatever happens in a restaurant kitchen between the hours of 4 p.m. and midnight that no one on the corporate level has ever witnessed firsthand. His name is Saul Keating. He is 53 years old. He is the founder and CEO of Copper Table Restaurants, a farm-to-table chain that operates 42 locations across 14 states, employs 6,000 people, and generates $480 million in annual revenue. The brand identity, the one that the marketing team built and that Saul approved and that appears on every menu, every website, every Instagram post, is this: honest food, honestly made by people who care. The irony of this tagline will become apparent to Saul over the next 5 days, and the irony will taste like the inside of a dish pit at 1 in the morning, metallic, hot, and impossible to wash off. Saul started Copper Table when he was 31. He was a line cook first, 4 years at a French restaurant in the West Village that no longer exists, then 2 years at a farm-to-table spot in Hudson that went under during the recession, then a year of catering out of his apartment in Astoria, making dinners for 12 in a kitchen that was built for 4. He understood kitchens. He understood the particular alchemy of heat and timing and muscle memory that turns raw ingredients into food that makes people close their eyes when they eat it. He understood that cooking is not art, it is craft, and craft is harder than art because craft has to be perfect every time, not just when inspiration strikes. His mother, Nell, was a cook, not a chef, a cook. She cooked at a diner in Yonkers for 23 years, the breakfast shift, 4 a.m. to noon, 6 days a week. She made eggs and pancakes and hash browns and coffee and the particular kind of grilled cheese that only diner cooks can make, the kind where the bread is pressed flat on the griddle until it's more butter than bread, and the cheese melts into a consistency that is technically a liquid and practically a religion. She made 800 meals a day. She never wrote a recipe. She never appeared on a television show. She never used the word artisanal or curated or farm-to-table. She just cooked, every morning, 4 a.m., until the diner closed and she retired, and 6 months later, she died. Because Nell was the kind of person whose body was powered by the rhythm of work, and when the rhythm stopped, the body saw no reason to continue. Saul built Copper Table in her image. The first location was in Williamsburg, a small space, 28 seats, an open kitchen where you could see the cooks and hear the sizzle and smell the char and feel the heat. Saul cooked the first 3 years himself. He was in the kitchen every night, on the line, expediting plating, running food when the servers were slammed, washing dishes when the dishwasher called out, doing every job because every job was his job, and the restaurant was his, and the food was his, and the standard was his, and the standard was, every plate leaves this kitchen like it's the only plate that matters. The chain grew. 42 locations, 6,000 employees. A corporate office in a converted warehouse in Long Island City with exposed brick and Edison bulbs, and a conference room called the Pantry, and another one called the Larder, and a third one called the Root Cellar, and a marketing team that named the conference rooms and thought the names were clever, and Saul thought the names were clever too, until this week when he will discover that the actual Root Cellar, the walk-in cooler in the basement of the flagship location on Smith Street in Brooklyn, has a compressor that has been failing for 3 months, and that nobody has fixed because the repair requires corporate approval. And corporate hasn't responded to the maintenance request because the maintenance request is sitting in a queue behind 41 other maintenance requests from 41 other locations. And the queue is managed by a facilities coordinator who is 26 years old and has never worked in a restaurant kitchen, and who prioritizes requests based on a rubric that assigns a higher urgency score to a broken light in the dining room than a failing compressor in the walk-in, because the rubric was designed by a consultant who understood branding and did not understand food safety. The employee survey arrived 6 weeks ago. Kitchen staff satisfaction, 29%. Front of house satisfaction, 38%. Turnover in the last 12 months, 44%. The restaurant industry average is 75%, so 44% looks good on paper. Saul has learned this week that looking good on paper is the corporate equivalent of plating a dish with microgreens to distract from the fact that the protein is overcooked. Go into a kitchen, his operations VP told him. A woman named Faye Kimura, who had been a restaurant manager for 15 years before joining corporate and who retained the restaurant manager's instinct for saying exactly what needed to be said at the exact moment it would cause the most productive discomfort. Not as the CEO, as a prep cook. Work the line, work the dish pit, see what your company looks like from the inside of an apron. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from today, because this story is about a billionaire who built a restaurant empire from a 28-seat kitchen and then walked back in to discover he couldn't survive a single dinner service. Monday, 3 p.m. Saul Keating walks through the back door of Copper Table's flagship location on Smith Street in Brooklyn wearing chef's pants, a white undershirt, and the medium apron that doesn't fit. His badge says Solomon Kent, prep cook/trail. His beard has been shaved. His hair, normally styled in the deliberate silver sweep that his wife calls the anchorman, is hidden under a black kitchen skull cap. His watch is gone. His wedding ring is gone. His shoes are the non-slip kitchen clogs that cost $40 and that he bought yesterday at the restaurant supply store on Bowery, and they are already uncomfortable in a way that suggests they will become agonizing by hour 6. The kitchen is already moving. Prep starts at 2 for a 6 p.m. open. 4 hours to transform raw product into the components of a menu that serves 300 covers on a Friday night. The mise en place, the French term for everything in its place, which is also the operating philosophy of every functional kitchen and the absence of which is the operating reality of every dysfunctional one, is being assembled on every station, proteins portioned and seasoned, vegetables cut and blanched, sauces reduced and held, garnishes prepped and stored in the small plastic containers called sixth pans that are the building blocks of kitchen organization. The chef de cuisine, the head chef, the person who runs this kitchen, is a man named Vaughn Osei. He is 38 years old, broad-shouldered, with forearms that carry the burns and scars of 15 years on the line. The topography of a cook's career written in healed tissue. His head is shaved, his voice is low, and carries across the kitchen without shouting, which is the mark of a chef who has learned that volume is not authority. Authority is competence. Authority is the ability to break down a whole fish in 90 seconds while simultaneously calling out the fire order for table 12 and noticing that the new line cook has his flame too high on the sauté pan. Vaughn looks at Saul. He looks at the badge. He looks at the apron that doesn't fit. "You the trail?" he says. "Yeah, Solomon." "You cooked before?" "Some." "Some" means you worked a brunch line at a cafe in college and you think you know what a kitchen is. This isn't a cafe. This is a 300-cover restaurant with a 45-minute ticket time and a zero-tolerance policy for food that leaves this window looking like anything less than what the menu promises. You start on prep. If you survive prep, you move to the line tomorrow. If you survive the line, we talk. What if I don't survive prep? Then you quit. Most trails quit. I've had 9 trails in 6 months. 7 quit. 1 was fired. 1 cried in the walk-in and then quit. What made them cry? The job, the hours, the heat, the speed. The fact that this kitchen runs on 12 people when it should run on 18, and the ones who are here are doing the work of the ones who aren't, and nobody upstairs seems to understand that a menu this ambitious requires a staff this kitchen doesn't have. Vaughn's eyes, dark, focused, the eyes of a man who is perpetually calculating ticket times, narrow slightly. "You ready?" "I'm ready." "You're not, but let's find out." If this story has touched your heart, take a moment to share it and subscribe to Untold Hearts, because sometimes the man who wrote the menu can't survive the kitchen that makes it. Prep, the station. Saul is assigned to vegetable prep. This sounds simple. It is not simple. Vegetable prep at copper table means 200 pounds of produce broken down into exact specifications in 4 hours. Carrots julienne to 1/8 inch, not 1/4, not 3/16, 1/8 because the menu says fine julienne and the menu is law. Shallots minced to a uniform size that could be measured with a caliper. Herbs picked leaf by leaf, not torn, not chopped, picked, because a torn basil leaf oxidizes at the edge and turns black, and black basil on a $42 plate is a failure that the diner may not notice, but the chef will. Saul knows how to use a knife. He was a line cook for 4 years. His knife skills were excellent, but 4 years on a line 22 years ago is not the same as 4 years on a line today. His hands are slower. His cuts are less precise. The muscle memory is there, buried under 22 years of meetings and spreadsheets and handshakes, but it emerges in fragments rather than in flow, the way a language you learned in childhood comes back in words but not sentences. The prep cook next to him, a woman named Luisa, mid-20s, Dominican, with a knife that moves so fast the blade is a blur, watches him struggle with the carrots. She watches for 10 minutes. Then, she puts down her own knife, walks to his station, and without a word adjusts his grip, repositions the carrot, and demonstrates the cut at speed. Like that, she says. Rock the blade. Don't push it. Let the weight do the work. Thanks. You're slow, but you'll get faster. Everybody's slow the first day. She goes back to her station. She has already prepped 60 pounds of onions. Her eyes are dry. She has developed the immunity to onion fumes that all prep cooks develop, or she's learned to cry without it affecting her speed, which is the same thing. Luisa has been at Copper Table for 3 years. She started as a dishwasher, the entry point for most kitchen careers, the position that pays the least and works the hardest, and that most people outside the restaurant industry don't realize is the backbone of every kitchen. Because without clean plates and clean pans, the line stops. And when the line stops, the restaurant stops. And when the restaurant stops, the revenue stops. And the revenue is the thing that the corporate office measures and reports and celebrates without ever acknowledging that the revenue begins with a 19-year-old woman standing over a dish pit in a 110-degree kitchen, scrubbing pans at a speed that would qualify as cardio. Luisa moved from dish to prep to garde-manger, the cold station, salads and appetizers, in 3 years. She wants to move to sauté. Sauté is the prestige station, the one closest to the chef, the one that handles the most complex dishes, the one that separates cooks from line cooks and line cooks from chefs. She has asked Vaughn about moving to sauté. Vaughn says she's ready. The problem is staffing. The kitchen is running 12 people when it should run 18, and if Luisa moves to sauté, her position on garde-manger is empty and there's nobody to fill it, because the starting wage for a line cook at Copper Table is $16 an hour, and $16 an hour in Brooklyn in January is not a wage that attracts applicants. It is a wage that filters for desperation. Why don't they pay more? Saul asks. And the question tastes wrong in his mouth because he knows the answer. He approved the wage scale. He signed the budget. He sat in the conference room called the pantry and reviewed the labor cost projections and said, "This looks right." Because the numbers looked right on the spreadsheet the way overcooked protein looks right under microgreens. Luisa looks at him. Because corporate sets the wages and corporate doesn't work in kitchens. Corporate works in an office with Edison bulbs and conference rooms named after food, and they decide what a cook is worth based on a spreadsheet, not based on what it feels like to stand in a 110-degree kitchen for 10 hours with a knife in your hand and burns on your arms making food that sells for $42 a plate. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second, costs nothing, and tells us to keep making stories like this one. Back to the story. Day 2. The line. Saul survives prep. Barely. His back is screaming, the particular scream of muscles that haven't been used in this way for 2 decades and that are making their displeasure known. His knife hand is cramping. His feet in the $40 clogs have progressed from uncomfortable to genuinely painful in the way that only standing on concrete for 10 hours can produce. Vaughn puts him on the line. Not sauté. Garde-manger, the cold station, Luisa's station. Luisa is next to him, expediting his mistakes in real time with the wordless efficiency of a cook who has learned that teaching in a kitchen doesn't involve explanation. It involves demonstration, repetition, and the occasional bark of behind when someone is about to collide with you while carrying a pot of boiling liquid. The dinner service starts at 6. By 6:15, the tickets are coming in a continuous stream, the printer chattering out orders in the staccato rhythm that every kitchen worker knows the way a soldier knows gunfire. The sound means work. The sound means now. The sound means the dining room is full, and every person in it has paid for the promise printed on the menu, and the kitchen has approximately 8 minutes to make that promise real. Saul plates salads, he plates appetizers, he plates the burrata with heirloom tomatoes that costs $28 and that requires the specific placement of 6 components in an arrangement that looks effortless and is not. He plates it wrong. He plates it wrong again. Vaughn appears at the window, the pass, the stainless steel counter where finished plates wait for runners, and looks at Saul's burrata and says one word. Again. Saul replates. Vaughn looks. Again, Saul replates. Better, not good, better. Fire table 7, move. The pace does not slow, the pace accelerates. By 7:30, the kitchen is at full velocity. Every station firing simultaneously, every cook moving in the choreographed chaos that is a professional kitchen at peak, the dance of bodies and knives and pans and plates that looks violent to outsiders and feels violent to participants, but that produces, at the end of each cycle, a plate of food that someone in the dining room will photograph and post on Instagram with a caption about how the food at Copper Table is just perfect, without any awareness that just perfect required 14 people working in a 110-degree room at a pace that would be classified as a workplace hazard in any other industry. Saul watches Vaughn expedite, expoing, calling orders, checking plates, managing the flow of tickets from printer to kitchen to pass to dining room, is the job of the head chef, and Vaughn does it the way a conductor leads an orchestra. With precision, with authority, and with the understanding that every musician in the room is better than the conductor at their specific instrument, and the conductor's job is not to play but to synchronize. Fire 2 lamb, 1 duck, hold the halibut on table 14, refire the risotto on 9. It broke, the butter split, start over. He speaks in the shorthand of a professional kitchen, a language that is incomprehensible to anyone outside the industry, and that communicates in 7 words, more information than most corporate emails communicate in 7 paragraphs. He also checks every plate, every one. 300 covers means roughly 800 individual plates, appetizers, mains, desserts, the amuse-bouche that the menu calls a gift from the kitchen and that requires a 30-second assembly that is performed 800 times per service and that nobody in the dining room thinks about because the point of the gift is that it looks effortless. Vaughn looks at 800 plates per night. He looks at each one the way a jeweler looks at a stone, for the flaw, the imperfection, the thing that would survive the dining room's attention, but not his own. When a plate fails, a sauce that's pooled wrong, a garnish that's wilted, a protein that's rested too long, he sends it back. Again. The cooks hear this word more than any other word in the English language. Again, again, again. The word is not cruelty. The word is standard. Saul understands this. He understood it 22 years ago when he was on the line, and the standard was his standard, and the restaurant was his restaurant, and every plate was personal. He understands it differently now, from the outside, from the corporate office where the standard has been abstracted into brand guidelines and food photography and the language of guest experience that the marketing team uses. And that means nothing to the person standing at garde-manger at 7:45 on a Tuesday, replating a burrata for the 3rd time because the heirloom tomatoes are a 1/4 inch off-center. The disconnect between what the corporate office calls the Copper Table experience and what the kitchen calls Tuesday is the distance that Saul has traveled this week, and the distance is measured in burns and blisters and the particular ache that settles into the lower back of a man who has stood on concrete for 20 hours in 2 days. At 8:45, the walk-in cooler alarm goes off. The alarm is a shrill electronic beep that cuts through the kitchen noise like a scream. Vaughn drops his pan, literally drops it on the stove, which is a thing that chefs do not do unless the alternative is worse, and walks to the walk-in. He opens the door. The temperature inside the walk-in is 51 degrees. It should be 38. The compressor is failing, the same compressor that has been failing for 3 months, the one that the maintenance request was filed for, the one that is sitting in a queue behind 41 other requests. "Get everything out," Vaughn says. His voice is calm, his face is not. His face is the face of a chef who is watching $3,000 of product. Proteins, dairy, produce, the raw materials of 300 covers, warm past the safe holding temperature, while the dining room is full and the tickets are still printing and the corporate office that could have approved the compressor repair 3 months ago is closed for the night because corporate keeps business hours and kitchens do not. The kitchen stops, not the service. The service cannot stop. The dining room is full, the tickets are printing, the promise on the menu doesn't pause for equipment failure. The cooks who can be spared, Saul, Louisa, the dish crew, form a chain and move product from the dying walk-in to the smaller reach-in coolers on the line. Saul carries cases of proteins, 20-pound cases of duck, lamb, fish, from the basement to the kitchen, up a staircase that is narrow and steep and that was designed in 1947 when the building was a hardware store, and that has never been renovated, because the renovation requires corporate approval, and the renovation request is in the same queue as the compressor repair. They save most of it, not all of it. Vaughn stands in the empty walk-in, 54 degrees now, still climbing, and inventories the loss. 40 pounds of fish, gone. 20 pounds of dairy, borderline. The total loss is approximately $900 in product. The compressor repair would have cost $1,200. The math is not complicated. The math is insulting. Vaughn looks at Saul. He doesn't know who Saul is. He sees a trail cook, a new guy, standing in the walk-in with sweat on his face and cases of protein in his arms and the particular expression of a man who has just watched food spoil because of a spreadsheet. "This happen often?" Saul asks. "The compressor? It's been dying since October. I filed the request. Facility said they'd escalate. That was 12 weeks ago. You know what escalate means in corporate? It means the email moves from one inbox to another inbox and nobody reads either one. Who approves the repair? Corporate. Everything goes through corporate. I can't authorize a repair over $500. A compressor is $1,200. So I file the request, and I wait, and I pray, and I move fish from the walk-in to the reach-in at 8:45 on a Friday night while the dining room eats food that was stored in a cooler that's 10 degrees too warm, and nobody at corporate loses sleep over it because nobody at corporate eats here. If Untold Hearts has become part of your week, consider joining the channel membership. A few dollars a month keeps these stories coming. Links are in the description. Now, back to the story. Day 3. The dish pit. Saul asks Vaughn to put him in the dish pit. Vaughn looks at him the way a general looks at a volunteer who has requested the front line, with equal parts respect and suspicion that the volunteer doesn't know what he's requesting. "The pit," Vaughn says. "Nobody asks for the pit. I want to see the whole kitchen." "You'll see the whole kitchen. You'll see it through steam and grease and 130 degrees of heat and the spray from a hose that will soak you in the first 10 minutes, and you'll stay soaked for the next 8 hours. The pit is where the kitchen sends everything it doesn't want. Dirty pans, broken plates, food waste, ego. If the line is the heart of the kitchen, the pit is the kidneys. It filters everything. Saul works the pit. Vaughn is right about everything. The steam, the grease. The heat, not the 110-degree heat of the line, but the 130-degree heat of industrial dishwashers running continuous cycles, the kind of heat that makes your vision blur and your clothes stick to your skin and your thoughts reduce to a single imperative. Keep moving, keep spraying, keep loading, keep unloading, keep the clean racks coming because the line needs pans and the line needs plates. And if the pit falls behind, the line falls behind. And if the line falls behind, the restaurant falls behind. And if the restaurant falls behind 300 people in the dining room, wait. And waiting is the one thing a restaurant cannot afford. The dishwasher, the person, not the machine, is a man named Orion. He's 22 years old. He has been in the pit for 14 months. He works 6 nights a week, 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., and he makes $14.80 an hour, which is 60 cents above minimum wage in New York. 60 cents. 60. The premium that Copper Table pays for the position that is the foundation of every service is 60 cents above the legal floor. Orion is fast, not just fast, precise. He loads the racks with the spatial efficiency of a Tetris champion, fitting pans and plates and ramekins into the dishwasher in configurations that maximize capacity and minimize cycles. He sprays with one hand and loads with the other and kicks the rack into the machine with his foot, and the machine cycles, and he unloads, and the cycle repeats, and the cycle never stops because the dining room never stops sending dishes, and the kitchen never stops sending pans. And Orion is the single point through which all of this flows. "How long have you been doing this?" Saul asks, shouting over the spray. 14 months. "You want to move up? Prep? Line?" "I want to cook. That's why I'm here. I applied for a prep position. Vaughn says I'm ready. HR says I need to complete a training module online. The training module requires a laptop. I don't have a laptop. The library has computers, but they close at 9 and I work until 2. So the training module sits there, and I sit here, and the distance between the dish pit and the prep station is one laptop I can't afford." One laptop. The training module was implemented by the Corporate Learning and Development Team, a team of 4 people in the Long Island City office who designed professional growth pathways for the company's 6,000 employees. The module takes approximately 2 hours to complete. It covers food safety, allergen protocols, and basic knife technique. It requires a computer with internet access. The assumption embedded in the module, the assumption that nobody on the L&D team questioned because nobody on the L&D team has ever worked in a dish pit at 2 a.m., is that every employee has a personal computer and internet access and the time and energy to complete a 2-hour online course after an 8-hour shift in a 130-degree pit. Saul thinks about this. He thinks about the corporate office, the exposed brick, the Edison bulbs, the conference room called the root cellar. Every person in that office has a laptop. The company provides them. MacBook Pros, refreshed every 3 years with carrying cases and wireless mice, and the assumption that professional work requires professional equipment. The dishwasher in the pit, the person who makes the kitchen function, who makes the line function, who makes the restaurant function, who makes the revenue function, does not get a laptop. The dishwasher gets 60 cents above minimum, and a training module he can't access, and a career pathway that dead ends at the dish pit door. "What's your name?" Saul asks. "Orion." "Orion, I'm Solomon." "I know. You're the trail cook who asked for the pit. Nobody asks for the pit. The pit is where people end up, not where they go on purpose." Maybe that should change. A lot of things should change. The compressor should change. The wages should change. The training module should change. The fact that I've been in this pit for 14 months and nobody from corporate has ever walked through that door should change. He sprays a pan. The spray hits the steel and bounces back in a mist that coats both of them. "You know who's been in this kitchen in the last year from corporate? 0 people, not one. They come to the dining room. They eat the food. They post it on Instagram. They sit at table 1, the VIP table by the window, and they order the tasting menu and they say, 'The food is incredible.' And they leave a tip on the company card and they go back to Long Island City and they send emails about brand consistency and guest experience, and they have never once asked what it's like to be the person who makes the food incredible. Not once." Orion loads another rack. He kicks it into the machine. The machine cycles. The steam rises. "Sorry," he says. "You asked me a question and I gave you a speech." It was a good speech. It was a tired speech. I've been giving it to myself for 14 months. It sounds the same every time. Day 5, the quit. Friday night, the busiest service of the week. 320 covers. The kitchen is at full burn. Every burner on, every oven on, the fryers popping, the ventilation system roaring, the temperature on the line cresting 115 degrees. Saul has been on garde-manger for 3 nights, and he has improved. His plates are cleaner, his timing is tighter, his hands have started to remember the old rhythms the way a pianist's hands remember a piece they haven't played in years. But the walk-in is still broken, the reach-in coolers are overstuffed, the proteins are being held at temperatures that are 2 degrees above safe. Vaughn is compensating, pulling product in smaller batches, checking temps every 15 minutes, running the kitchen with the paranoid vigilance of a man who knows that one bad batch of fish could shut the restaurant down, and that the thing standing between 300 customers and a health department citation is his personal attention, because the equipment that is supposed to do this job has been broken for 3 months, and nobody at corporate has fixed it. At 9:15, Vaughn calls a halt. "Fire nothing," he says. His voice carries across the kitchen in the specific frequency of absolute authority. "Hold all tickets, nobody plates until I say." He walks to the reach-in. He checks the temperature. He closes his eyes for 2 seconds, a long time in a kitchen running 320 covers on a Friday night. He opens them. "The lamb is done," he says. 43 degrees internal. It's been sitting above safe for 20 minutes. I'm pulling it. That's 80 covers of lamb off the menu tonight. 80 covers. Because the walk-in has been broken for 3 months, and I filed the request in October, and it is now January, and nobody at corporate has done a single thing about it. The kitchen absorbs this the way kitchens absorb every crisis, with profanity, adaptation, and speed. Vaughn rewrites the service plan in his head in 10 seconds. The lamb is 86th. The servers need to be told. The guests who ordered lamb need alternatives. The tasting menu, the $78 5-course tasting menu that is Copper Table's signature offering, and that includes lamb as the 4th course, needs a substitution, and the substitution needs to be prepared from whatever protein the reach-in coolers have that's still at safe temperature. "Louisa, fire extra duck, we're substituting. Garde manger, double the halibut prep, we're pushing fish on the floor. Everyone else, hold your stations, keep firing, keep plating. The dining room doesn't know what happened in the walk-in, and the dining room doesn't need to know. Our job is to make 300 people believe that tonight is perfect. That's what we do." The kitchen moves. The kitchen always moves. This is the thing that Saul has learned this week that he could not have learned from the 8th floor or the corporate office or the quarterly report, that a kitchen is not a machine. A machine stops when a part breaks. A kitchen doesn't stop. A kitchen adapts. A kitchen finds the workaround, the substitution, the creative solution that transforms a crisis into a service that the dining room will never know was a crisis. The cooks do this not because they are paid to. At $16 an hour, they are manifestly underpaid to, but because the kitchen is theirs in a way that the company is not. The company belongs to Saul. The kitchen belongs to Vaughn and Louisa and Orion and the 12 people who stand in it every night and make it work. Saul plates halibut. He plates it fast. He plates it clean. Vaughn checks it at the pass, and for the first time all week, he doesn't say, "again." He says nothing. He lets it go. The plate moves to the dining room. Someone will eat it. Someone will photograph it. Someone will post it with a caption about how the food at Copper Table is incredible, and they will not know that the halibut on their plate exists, because the lamb on someone else's plate was 86th, because a compressor that should have been fixed 3 months ago was sitting in a queue behind a broken light fixture in a dining room in the Scottsdale location. At 9:45, the last tickets fire. At 10:15, the kitchen begins the breakdown, the nightly ritual of cleaning, sanitizing, wrapping, storing, sweeping, mopping, that takes an hour and a half, and that is done by the same 12 people who just cooked 320 covers and who will go home and sleep for 5 hours and come back tomorrow and do it again. Vaughn calls a halt. "Fire nothing," he says again, but this time his voice is different. This time, it's not the voice of a chef managing a crisis. It's the voice of a man who has made a decision. He turns. He sees Saul, sees Solomon, the trail cook, standing at garde manger with a plate in his hands and an expression on his face that Vaughn cannot read. "You," Vaughn says. "Solomon, come here." Saul walks to the pass. "You've been here 5 days," Vaughn says. "You've worked prep. You've worked the line. You've worked the pit. You're a decent cook. You could be a good cook if you stayed. But I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to listen." "I'm listening." "Quit?" The kitchen goes quiet. Not silent, and the machines are still running, the fryers are still popping, the printer is still chattering, but the human sound stops. The cooks stop moving. They look at Vaughn. They look at Saul. "Quit," Vaughn says again. "Not because you're bad, because this kitchen will break you. It breaks everyone. We're running 12 people for a menu that needs 18. We're holding product in coolers that aren't cold enough. We're paying cooks $16 an hour in a city where rent is $2,000 a month. We're asking people to work in 115 degrees for 10 hours and then go home and come back and do it again, and the reward is a paycheck that doesn't cover their lives, and a compressor that doesn't get fixed, and a corporate office that names its conference rooms after kitchens, but has never stood in one. He looks at Saul. Not at Solomon, at Saul, through him. With the X-ray vision of a person who works on the ground floor and who has developed the ability to see through the disguises that the sixth floor wears. You're not a trail cook, Vaughn says. The kitchen goes truly quiet now. I don't know who you are, Vaughn says, but you're not a trail cook. Trail cooks don't ask questions about compressor repair timelines. Trail cooks don't calculate the cost of spoiled fish. Trail cooks don't work the dish pit voluntarily. And trail cooks don't have knife skills that are 20 years rusty but were clearly trained in a French kitchen. Saul stands at the pass. The apron that doesn't fit is stained with 5 days of work. Tomato and oil and grease, and the particular residue of a kitchen that produces 300 plates a night with 12 people and broken equipment and a wage scale that was set by a man in a conference room called the pantry, who is now standing in the actual kitchen in a medium apron with his identity crumbling around him like the compressor that should have been fixed in October. My name is Saul Keating, he says. I own this restaurant. The kitchen doesn't react the way he expects. There's no gasp, no murmur, no dramatic silence followed by a slow clap. There is instead a very specific sound, the sound of 12 people who have been working in a broken kitchen for too long, looking at the man who broke it and deciding collectively that they are too tired to be surprised. Vaughn looks at him. The look is not angry. It's worse than angry. It's the look of a chef who has spent 15 years building a kitchen and watching it be undermined by the very company that is supposed to support it, and who is now standing face to face with the man at the top and feeling not rage, but exhaustion. The deep, structural exhaustion of a person who has been fighting a system and has just been told that the system has a face, and the face is wearing an apron that doesn't fit. Fix the compressor, Vaughn says. I will. Fix the wages. I will. Fix the staffing. I will. And get Orion a laptop. The kid's been in the pit for 14 months because he can't access a training module. He's the hardest worker in this kitchen, and he's stuck behind a 2-hour online course and a computer he can't afford. Fix it. I'll fix it tonight. Don't fix it tonight. Fix the system that made it possible. The compressor, the wages, the laptop, those are symptoms. The disease is that your company has 42 restaurants and 0 people in corporate who have ever stood where you're standing right now. The disease is that the people who make the food and the people who make the decisions have never been in the same room at the same time. Saul takes off the apron. He folds it. He sets it on the pass, the stainless steel counter where finished plates wait for runners, the boundary between the kitchen and the dining room, the line between the people who make the food and the people who eat it. You're right, he says, about all of it. And you were right to tell me to quit. Because the version of me that walked in here 5 days ago, the one who approved the wage scale and signed the budget and sat in a conference room called the pantry, that person should quit. That person doesn't deserve to run this kitchen. You do. The kitchen is silent, 12 cooks standing at 12 stations, each one processing the information differently. Louisa, the prep cook who adjusted his grip on day 1, who showed him how to rock the blade, is looking at him with an expression that is moving from disbelief to something harder to name, something that lives in the territory between vindication and anger. The face of a woman who has been saying for 3 years that the wages are too low and the staffing is too thin, and who has just been proven right by the man who set the wages and approved the staffing. Orion is standing in the doorway of the dish pit, holding a spray nozzle soaked from neck to ankles, and his face is the simplest face in the room. Not angry, not shocked, just young and tired and hopeful in the specific way that 22-year-olds are hopeful, which is to say, cautiously, because he's old enough to have been disappointed and young enough to believe that disappointment is not permanent. I'm not going to stand here and make promises, Saul says. Promises are easy. Promises are what corporate does. We promise to value our team members. We promise to invest in our people. We promise to listen. I've signed those promises. I've sent those emails. The promises didn't fix the compressor. The promises didn't raise the wages. The promises didn't get Orion a laptop. He looks at Vaughn. So instead of promises, I'm going to tell you what's happening. Not what I plan to do. What's happening, starting now. The compressor will be replaced this weekend, not repaired. Replaced. I'm approving it tonight. The facility's queue, the system where your maintenance requests sit behind 41 other requests, while a 26-year-old coordinator prioritizes them based on a rubric, is gone. Starting Monday, every maintenance request goes directly to your general manager, who can approve up to $5,000 without calling anyone. Above $5,000 goes to Faye Kimura, who can approve anything that affects food safety or staff safety without a committee. The wages go up. Line cooks to 22, prep to 19, dishwashers to 18. Across all 42 locations, the cost is $3.1 million. Our revenue is $480 million. The raise is less than 1%. We spend more on the office renovation. If the board has a problem with it, the board can come work a Friday night service and tell me that $16 an hour is fair after they've stood where you're standing. Every kitchen gets staffed to menu requirements. If the menu needs 18, the kitchen has 18. If we can't hire 18 at the current wage, the wage goes up until we can. If the margin shrinks, the margin shrinks. The margin is not more important than the people who create the margin. And every hourly employee at every location gets a company tablet for training, scheduling, and career development. No more online modules that require a laptop you can't afford. No more career pathways that dead end at the dish pit because the gateway requires equipment that the company provides to corporate and withholds from kitchens. Vaughn listens. He stands at the pass with his arms at his sides and his scarred forearms visible, and his face doing the thing that faces do when a person who has been fighting for a long time is told that the fight is over. Not relief exactly, not celebration, but the slow, careful release of tension that has been held so long it has become structural, part of the posture, part of the man. One more thing, Saul says. Every member of the corporate team works a full kitchen shift every quarter, not observing, working. They wear the apron, they feel the heat. They stand in a 110-degree kitchen and they make 300 plates and they go home with burns on their arms and grease in their hair. Because you cannot write a menu for a kitchen you've never worked in, and you cannot set a wage for a person whose job you've never done. He takes off the apron. He folds it. He sets it on the pass. The stainless steel counter where finished plates wait for runners, the boundary between the kitchen and the dining room, the line between the people who make the food and the people who eat it. That apron doesn't fit me, Saul says. It fits every person in this kitchen. It's yours. Louisa picks up the apron. She doesn't unfold it. She holds it the way you hold something that has changed meaning, a piece of cloth that was a costume 5 days ago and is now evidence, a stained white flag that says, "The man who owns the building stood where you stand, and it changed him. And now things change." 2 weeks later. The compressor is replaced. The changes are happening, not overnight. Institutions resist change the way kitchens resist cold, with thermal mass and inertia and the accumulated heat of how things have been done. But the compressor is new, and the walk-in is 37 degrees, and the product is safe, and Vaughn no longer checks the temperature every 15 minutes with the paranoid vigilance of a man defending a position he knows is undermanned. Orion completed the training module on a Tuesday afternoon at the library, on the company tablet that arrived at the restaurant the Monday after Saul's reveal. He started on prep the following week. Vaughn put him on vegetable prep, carrots, julienne to 1/8 inch, and Orion's cuts were slow and his carrots were uneven, and Louisa stood next to him and adjusted his grip and said, "Rock the blade, let the weight do the work." And the cycle began again, the way it always begins at the bottom, with a knife and a carrot and a cook who is willing to learn. Louisa moved to sauté, the position she'd been ready for. The position she'd been denied because moving her would leave garde-manger empty and there was nobody to fill it. There's somebody to fill it now. The new hires came in at $19 an hour and the applications came fast because word travels in the restaurant industry the way fire travels in a kitchen, horizontally, quickly, through every surface it touches. The word was copper table pays. The word was copper table staffs. The word was the CEO worked the dish pit. Vaughn stayed. He was offered a corporate position, Vice President of Culinary Operations, a title that comes with an office and a salary and a conference room. He turned it down. "I'm a chef," he said. "Chefs work in kitchens. If you want me to fix your kitchens, I'll do it from inside one." He did fix them. Not from an office, from the pass. He visits a different copper table location every week, working a service, checking equipment, tasting every dish, standing shoulder to shoulder with cooks who now make $22 an hour, and who have, for the first time since many of them started, health insurance. The health insurance was Faye's addition. She presented the cost to Saul on a Tuesday morning, and he approved it on a Tuesday morning because the cost was less than the company spent annually on marketing photography. And the people who make the food deserve at least as much investment as the photographs of the food. Saul works one shift a month, not at the flagship, at a different location each month. He rotates, he preps, he plates, he washes dishes, he wears the apron that doesn't fit, and he stands on the line next to cooks who call him chef, not because he's the CEO, but because he earned it 5 days at a time, in the heat and the steam and the grease and the particular alchemy of a kitchen that turns raw ingredients into food that makes people close their eyes. Last month, he worked the dish pit at the Denver location. He stood next to a dishwasher named Marco, who had been in the pit for 2 months and who wanted to move to prep, and who had already completed the training module on the company tablet and who was starting on vegetable prep the following week. Marco didn't know who Saul was. He found out at the end of the shift when the general manager introduced them. Marco looked at Saul, soaked, red-faced, standing in the pit with a spray nozzle in his hand, and said, "You need to work on your rack loading. You're wasting cycles." "I know," Saul said. "Orion was faster." "Everybody's faster than you, chef." "That's fair." The conference rooms in Long Island City were renamed. The pantry is now Conference Room A. The larder is Conference Room B. The root cellar is Conference Room C. Saul ordered the nameplates removed personally. "We don't name rooms after things we don't understand," he said. "When every person in this office has worked a shift in an actual pantry, we can talk about naming things after them." On the wall of Conference Room A, there is a framed apron, white cotton, size medium, stained with tomato and oil and grease. Next to the apron, a framed photograph of Nell, the one from the diner, the one where she's standing behind the griddle at 4:30 in the morning with a spatula in one hand and a coffee pot in the other, and the look on her face that every cook recognizes. The look of a woman who has been on her feet for 23 years and who would not trade 1 hour of it for a desk in a conference room and a sign on the door. The apron doesn't fit anyone in the building. It fits everyone in the kitchen. Thank you for watching this story. If it reminded you that the people who write the menu should spend more time in the kitchen, share it. Subscribe to Untold Hearts for more stories about the distance between the corporate office and the place where the work actually happens. Tell us in the comments, what would change if the person who runs your company worked your shift?